Hello, I'm Matt, and this Loxley Quality Time tutorial is to help you with this painting, Peaceful Reflections from the Cantisso collection. If you haven't already watched our techniques tutorial videos, please have a look at them before starting your project. They give you some valuable information about painting with the quality time range and help you get the most out of your quality time. This video contains specific information about your chosen painting, but we assume that you're already familiar with the general techniques covered in our tutorial videos. Peaceful Reflections features Derwent Water, one of the main lakes in the Lake District National Park, and one of considerable scenic value. The lake lies immediately south of the town of Keswick and is 3 miles long and 1 mile wide, and fed and drained by the River Derwent, from which it derives its name. As well as the attraction of boating and water sports, the hills, known locally as fells, attract tourists as well as providing a magnificent backdrop to the lake. I have added a swan to this picture as it matches the tranquility and majesty of the scene. I'm going to start with the sky here, which is always quite a useful place to start because you're working down so your hand's not going in the paint. There is a technique video on painting skies which gives you more information, which we recommend you to look at before doing the sky. And I've mixed this lovely pale blue using mainly white, 75% white, and 25% of the light blue. There's 2 blues in this pack, so it's the light blue. You can add a little water if you want to, particularly if the paint's going dry. I'm not actually using water with this mix. I recommend that you mix enough paint so that you can do sweeps right across in the same colour mix. So mix up plenty of the blue and white. And I'm using horizontal brush strokes, which is important. And I'm using the larger of the 2 brushes. There's 2 brushes in the pack and I'm using the larger one. It's good for areas like this, big areas. This lovely big open sky. So nice smooth brush strokes using the tip of the hair. And then you get it nice and smooth, there's no clouds, so it's important to get it smooth. We're working our way down the sky here. I'm adding a little bit of more white in with the mix as we come lower down towards the horizon, which is, you'll notice from your photo that it's much paler. Most skies are paler nearer the horizon. And then I'm carefully cutting round the hills, so I'm following the lines. Try not to go over them. And even if your brush strokes, they're not exactly going horizontally here, we can always finish them off, what I call finish them off horizontally, so that you brush them out so that brush strokes are horizontal. Then the sky looks normal. It's only clouds that you need brush strokes in different directions. Actually a very beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. I have to do it a bit slower, more detail when you're nearer the hills there. The sky will always look a bit patchy on the stage 1 of the painting. And then when you go over it again in stage 2, it gets rid of any patchiness. So it's quite normal to look patchy at this stage. All the brush strokes are all in the same direction. Always mix the paint on the paler side because it tends to mix darker than you would imagine, just till you get used to it. Just putting a bit more blue in the middle here to get rid of this white. That's my sky. You'll notice that the edge of the canvas it's got no staples, it's just smooth canvas round, and I'm painting the same colour as the sky. I'm painting round the edge. There's not actually any printed outline, but if you just take the colour that you're using round the edge, it just looks finished off. And then if you decide not to frame the picture, it still looks finished even though you're not going to put a frame on it. Loxley was actually the first company to bring out what we called staple-free edges on the canvas. It was quite a move forward in the industry. Originally, canvases always had either nails or tacks down the edge, and this looked quite messy if you weren't going to frame a canvas. So Loxley pioneered this clean edge canvas, which has been a huge success. I'm now going to move on to the water using a similar mix of blue, just possibly slightly paler, and working my way across, again with horizontal brush strokes, which is important for the water. Again using the big brush, this is the best brush for this area, and it's just a mirror of the sky basically, so it's darker towards the bottom here and then paler up towards where the reflection of the mountains comes in. I'm just working up to the reflection of the hills or fells as they're known locally in this area, around the reflection of the swan. Just using the tip of the brush, really gentle brush strokes. It's a bit wiggly, the reflection line here, but that's how it should be because the water shimmering. I'm using plenty of white For this little area here, some of these areas, I'm just going to use the smaller brush just to get into those detail areas there. Again, like the sky, it'll be a bit patchy, but that's okay. The lines in the water actually work in your favour, so I wouldn't worry too much, because it looks like the actual water shimmering. And even if you have to do other angles on the brush strokes, always finish them off horizontally, as they'll show, the brush strokes show in the finished painting. Really gentle brush strokes, just with the tip of the brush. I'm going to paint the lighter area of these fells, and I've mixed this yellowy green colour using mainly yellow. Green's quite a funny colour. It behaves better mixed with another colour. Each colour seems to have got its own character, a bit like people. They have different characters, and same with paint. Some are more transparent, but green on its own is quite a bold colour. Just working way around the outlines, keeping off the tree areas. You'll see that there's these lines showing through, which is good. I'm going to paint over areas where this tree is because it will show through. The leaves don't cover the whole area. The brush strokes on this area are following the contour of the fell, which is important for it to look right. Following nature's direction, brushing out the excess colour. And I'm doing the top of the hill, being careful not to go onto the sky. You can use your photograph to see where these paler areas are. This is all stage one, what we refer to as stage one, so we're just working our way across the hills now. And while I've got this colour mix, I'm just adding a little bit more yellow and doing the reflections, so it's like the mirror of these hill areas. And on the reflections, it's important to use the brush strokes horizontally, like the water. So using the similar colour, similar shade as you are for the fell, just using the brush strokes horizontally, and again keeping to these areas. Nice gentle strokes, just tickling the surface. You're not putting pressure on the canvas. Okay, so I'm now working on the bigger areas of the fells, and I'm cutting into the edge of the fell along the horizon, and I'm trying to keep the shape of these fells so that you're actually painting them the shape they are, following down with the brush strokes. Because I'm painting a bigger area, I'm using my bigger brush here, but just following the contour of the fell, and you'll see that the lines are showing through, which is what I want, so that I can come back and build in more detail later. So you're just sort of following the natural curve of the hill. If you imagine like rainwater where it would run, that's the direction of your brush strokes. If you imagine a volcano erupting and the lava is like the paint, so it's sort of running down, follows the easiest course down to the trees like that. I'm just going to use my smaller brush, and you can actually use the same mix that was on your larger brush and just take the paint off with the smaller brush, so you're sure to have the same colour. It's okay to see the brush strokes in this because it looks like the actual landscape of the fell. You can see the shape of the fell. Cutting up the edge with just the very tip of the hairs of the brush, and you can be a bit more free in the middle here. Again with a little brush for the finer detail. So you see here, each fell is being painted individually. So you're keeping the individuality of each fell so that they stand out. They're not all just merged into one on your final picture, which is important. You want them to look like individual fells. Just cutting around these lighter areas. Just following nature's direction. Nature has a direction, and if you just follow that, the picture will look right. And again, you can take the colour around the edge. This is where the ramblers go, on these top of these fells. The bigger areas look better done with the bigger brush, but then you can just fill in with the smaller brush. Get rid of any excess paint. If you leave paint on thicker, it'll make it look darker. It's important just to level it out, even it out. That's the fells done. I'm going to move on to the reflections next, and again we're just going to mirror what's up there, slightly paler down on the water. So it's just a slightly paler shade of the same, and I'm cutting around the trees, careful not to paint where the trees are going to be. So just following the outline and then finishing the brush strokes horizontally. You'll need to use the smaller brush for this area. If you can get a nice crisp line along here where the reflection looks more stunning, again brush out the excess paint and then finish it off horizontally. Be careful to go round the swan and round its reflection as well. Because the swan is white, you'll need to keep the paint off the swan. It's hard to go over white over another colour. The white's very transparent. So you're just cutting up to it like that. Always just keep referring to your picture to see where the colour should be, and putting the colour on, then just going over it again just to even the paint out. All with horizontal brush strokes. Again, you're following nature's direction, using brush strokes at this angle just to get in these small areas. just finishing the brush strokes horizontally. The reflections are basically just a bit paler and a bit more hazy than the scene what it's reflecting. If you brush the paint out evenly, you'll see the outlines through it. I'm now going to do the grass first through these trees here, and I've mixed a very pale green using a lot of yellow as I want it to contrast with the trees, so I don't want the grass to be lost amongst the trees. And I'm using horizontally brush strokes with my bigger brush, a nice lush green colour. It's actually a very wet part of the country. You can see from the greenness of the grass how lush it is. It's a bit showing through the trees, so I can paint the trees around it. And then for the reflection of the grass, I'm just slightly yellower and just follow the same area. And again, the outlines showing through. That's my grass and the reflections. Now I'm going to go on to the foliage, the trees. I'm going to do the lighter part of the trees first. Some of them vary a little bit in their lightness. These trees across here are fairly light, and it's quite a similar colour to the grass. It doesn't matter too much about the brush strokes. In fact, if they're going different ways, it looks more effective because it looks like the foliage, the leaves are all going different ways. Again, you'll see the outlines showing through, so I can keep these shapes of the trees later by seeing the outlines. So I maintain a lighter area here. It's mainly the trees at the back across here that are darker, and then when we do the shadows as well, they'll be enhanced further, so we'll bring out some of the contrast then, using my bigger brush of the two. Doesn't matter if you're getting slightly different mixes of green. By adding different amounts of yellow, it makes it more interesting. You can almost mix the paint a bit on the canvas. See, there's a little bit of green coming through there. It makes it look more interesting. There is a video on painting trees and foliage, which we recommend you to have a look at. It gives you more information on this. You can work in a bit darker green into some of these areas. It's up to you how much detail you want to put into the picture. You can spend as long as you like on these colours, just playing with them, pushing the colours backwards and forwards, using more yellow or more green, and to keep the individuality of these trees. This one here is just a bit sparse at the top, so I'm leaving it so you can see the hills through the trees, which is important. So you're just altering the shade of green by adding different amounts of yellow. Each picture I've done is slightly different because it's almost impossible to get the same mix, but it makes the picture more individual, more unique, because the trees are always green, so it just doesn't matter what shade of green, because the lighting's different times of the day, and the leaves are different at different times of the year anyway. Mixing a bit more yellow in for these ones further back. Always mix paler. You can go over it again and darken it, just adding a bit more green in. So I want it to stand off from the grass area. Acrylic painting is made up of layers of the paint. Because it's transparent, you can see through to the other colours. For this tree over here, I'm just going to mix a tiny bit of light brown in, because it's actually quite a browny green tree. And that one there is actually quite brown as well, so I'll just add a bit of brown into this one. You see what I mean by just manipulating the colours to how you want them. By using these pale shades, you can just change it quite easily. By mixing the pure green with other colours, you're getting these lovely shades of green. Now I'm going to go on to the darker trees, and for this you can just use pure green or putting in this green mixed with blue, and I think it looks more like real pine trees, which I think these are supposed to be. While I've got this mix, I'm just working away across, putting a bit more colour into these trees, so you're getting more contrast gradually for these darker areas. Now I've missed a bit of the hillside through here, so I'm going to go back to this bit where the hill's showing through behind, just add it back in. So I'm doing these reflections now, using a similar shade of green to that I've just used, but just made it slightly paler by adding a bit more yellow. As with other reflections, I'm using horizontal brush strokes, so even if you have to work at different angles to get to the paint where you need to, then just finish off horizontally. It's nice that I've got the outlines coming through because I can build into them the detail later on in stage 2. Keep loading your brush so it's not dragging the dry paint. Come out a bit too yellow, that mix. This is more like it. So I'm painting around the reflections of the grass. Just need a bit of browny tree for this one here. Bit of a paler mix for this reflection here. So you're just mirroring what's above. And then this one's a bit browner, so I just add a bit of light brown in for this tree here. You can see your picture coming to life now. It gets really fun. What I'm going to do here, where it's a bit patchy, I'm going to come back with some yellow, because it's a good binder. It gets rid of these gaps. But I'll wait till that's dry before I do that. I'm just going to go onto this darker area here. So this was the green with a little bit of blue. And again, you can use whichever paintbrush you think's best. Just like filling in these areas with colour. And then while I've got the green, I'm just going to go into some of these areas. Try not to overload your brush with paint. You're just like influencing. So you're just trying to mirror. Often if you just sit back and have a look at it, you can see where you might have missed something. Keep referring to your photograph as well as your colour guide. Right, I'm just going to key some of these colours together. See where I've got little gaps where there's paint's not gone? I'm just going to use a bit of yellow. It's a good colour just for keying in. By leaving streaks of yellow, it looks quite effective as well. It looks like they're shimmering in the water. So it's just getting rid of some of these patchy areas and giving me a shimmering effect. So it's doing two things at once. But yellow is quite a transparent colour, so I'm not going to lose anything, not going to cover anything up. It's just going to make it more interesting. And that's like the layers of acrylic. Because they're transparent, you're just building one layer on top of another. So I'm now putting in the tree trunks, and I'm using the small brush, just the very tip of the hairs, and I'm loading the brush regularly. That's the secret, a well-loaded brush, and just using the tip. And then what I'm going to do for each tree is just do the reflection. So you can either do all the trees and then do the reflection separately, or do the reflections as you go along. It's just very fine lines. You're giving an impression of branches there. Some of these trees, and others it's the actual trunks. Just really fine lines, as fine as you can. Do the reflection to try and mirror where the branches are. And if you do the reflection bigger or fatter than it should be, then you can go back to these trees and change that. This particular tree here has got a bit of white in it, so I'm just mixing white with the brown, and do the same for the reflection. So again, whatever you do above, you do for the reflection as well. It's like doing the way you can see the trunk between the foliage, the leaves, and then as the branches get further up the tree, use finer lines. Keep referring to your photo. On the actual canvas, it's not actually printed with the branch coming right down here. But if you look at the picture, it is. Some of these really faint lines, it's just an impression of branches. Again, this branch here has got a bit of white on it. It's just a paler bark. So you're just mirroring the branches. So the branch comes here and it does the same in the reflection. Then it'll look right. So I'm now going to do the water's edge here, which is a combination of like shale and little stones and things. And I've mixed up this grey colour using mainly white with a bit of dark brown. And I'm just painting this quite randomly. We don't want it one solid colour because it'll look wrong. And you'll notice on your photo that in this bit here there is some sort of driveway that comes down to the water's edge. So I'm going to leave that bit paler. Just mirror the reflection in the water. And I'm going to mix a bit of yellow with the white just to make a different shade. And then using light and dark brown, I'm just going to put some tiny little dots that just resembles the rocks and stones at the edge of just tiny little specks. You can use some of the grey paint as well. Again, I'm leaving this area not too busy because of the driveway. Makes the shoreline look interesting. You can use some darker brown. You've got a bit of contrast going on. Some places you can put it on quite thick, the paint. So there's my shoreline. You can come back at another stage when this is dried. You can put a bit more of the yellow and white in just to key it all together. And while that's drying, I'm just going to do the swan, which you'll notice I've kept it all nice and crisp, so I've not put any paint on where the swan is going. For the wing and main body of the swan, I can put the paint on quite thickly so that I can sculpture shapes of the feathers into the paint. And then for the head and neck, because the feathers are quite smooth on this part, I'll have to brush out the paint. So using the texture of it, and then here I'm brushing the paint out. This particular swan, which is the most popular in England, is called the mute swan, and it's got its name because of the relatively little noise that it makes, especially compared with other waterfowl. By doing the paint thick, I'm actually getting the shape of the tail in here. The same with the reflection, using white and putting it on quite thickly so I can get some lines in it. I'm using horizontal brush strokes. Come back over this white when it's dried and do another coat if you want to build up the texture a bit more. I'm now going to do the beak, and I'm going to mix yellow with a little bit of red. It's quite a transparent colour, but again on stage 2 when you go over this beak area it'll cover better. Just using the very tip of the brush just to keep it as small as possible, and then the reflection the same. And then I'm onto the top of the leg and the eye, and for this I'm just using dark brown. It's a very dark brown, so it'll look black to the eye, and the leg stops off there because it's obviously under the water. There's the eye, and it's got like a bulbous bit over the top of its beak there, and then just in the reflection we need an eye and just the bulbous bit. So that's stage 1 completed now. Every part of the canvas has been painted. Right, so I'm on to stage 2 of the sky here now, doing the same techniques as with stage 1. So horizontal brush strokes, nice and even. You see the paint is covering much better on the second time, so you're getting a much better finish. Paler towards the horizon, so I've just mixed in a bit more white. We're just merging that in there. Keep the sky colour off the fells, and even if you work at angles with your brush strokes, then finish them off horizontally. For the reflected sky and the water, using the same similar mix, and it's just a mirror of the sky, so it's paler towards the reflection of the fells. Stage 2 is more rewarding because you can see the detail of the picture coming to light. Working the paint a little bit so that it's not streaky, getting rid of any brush marks. So now I'm doing the fells, working on some of these lighter areas first, and I'm just putting in some of the detail. So I'm not particularly going over the whole area, but just with this greeny colour, sort of a hedgerow or something in the distance. So I'm just adding just a bit of interest, and then this side is a bit darker, so just to give it more depth and character. The detail that I've done in this fell here, I'm just going to put a little bit in this reflection. That's the light areas, then I'm going to work on the darker areas. Okay, so I'm doing stage 2 of the fells, and I've mixed up this darker colour, and you can mix different shades of colour using different amounts of the blue and brown, keeping the individuality of the hills, following the natural contours. I'm using the smaller brush as I want to be more controlled where the paint is applied. It's not just a question of covering the whole area, because by getting different shades I can create more interesting effects. And you can deliberately do them patchy. From a distance, a lot of these fells look like patchwork quilts, and sometimes you can just mix a bit more brown in, and you can see where the blue is coming through, getting these interesting effects. Just pushing the colours around till you're happy. You can lighten them off with a bit of yellow, and you see the detail you can get with the smaller brush. Now that I've finished stage 2 on the fells, I'm going to do the reflections, and again we're just mirroring the similar colours but just slightly lighter shade, working around the swan very carefully. And remember that the brush strokes must finish horizontally, so even if you do have to do it at a different angle, then just finish them off horizontally. It's not so important about covering the whole area with this particular colour. You can go back over it with a bit of yellow just to key it all in if you need to. I've actually gone a bit darker than I wanted to on this reflection of the fells, of the darker fells, so I'm just putting a bit of yellow in to lighten it, and I'm leaving some of the yellow showing with these horizontal brush strokes just to create that feeling of water. Although it's reflecting the hills, it's actually, the water is flat. We're showing that in these brush strokes in this direction, and if we leave a bit of the yellow in, it just looks like it's shimmering as well as lightening it up. I'm now doing stage 2 on the trees here, and I'm using the small brush so I can get more detail in. Little brush strokes to resemble the leaves. So I'm just adding various greens basically, so leaving these grass areas, picking out these individual like brush strokes. It's just creating this foliage effect. Little gentle brush strokes. If you want to lighten it, just add a bit of yellow. You can put the paint on a bit thicker as well so that it creates a bit of dimension. You can just use pure green and sometimes a shade of green using yellow, or even green with light brown to create a different shade. Giving the trees dimension when you get these different shades of green. Still leaving my little area of grass that's showing through. Right, so I'm just doing stage 2 of the reflections of the trees now that the trees are all completed. I'm basically just mirroring what I've done on the vegetation and on the trees. So I'm just building up the various different greens. And again, make sure you use horizontal brush strokes so that it looks right. And also the reflections of the tree trunks, if you go over those again with the light brown. Right, so I'm now doing stage 2 of the swan. Like we did the first time, we can build up the texture on the feathers, especially on the wing. So just putting the paint on nice and thick and then brushing it out nearer the body and neck. For underneath the wing, I'm just going to put a tiny bit of light blue in with the white, just to give it a bit of shading, and under its tail as well. I'm going to use some of this light blue on the reflection as well, and then behind its head as well. Just going to use a bit of neat blue just to separate the swan from the water. Now I'm going to do the beak. And if you remember, this was quite a transparent colour, so this time it should make it a bit darker. And then again with the dark brown, just make the eye a bit bolder. And then on the beak, just with a tiny tip of the brush, I'm just going to put those little black line in its beak. And that's the swan completed. Just going to add a bit more to this shoreline here. Bit of pure white to put in some other stones, and put this driveway back in. Mix in a bit of brown with the white to make a grey colour. Then with light brown I'm just putting in some more little dots. That's stage 2 completed now. We've gone over the whole painting and it's now ready for the shadows in stage 3. Right, I'm now on stage 3 of my painting. I'm going to do the shadows, and I've mixed up the red and the blue for the shadow colour. And because a lot of the shadows are fairly small, I'm going to use my small brush. Just putting a few shadows on the hills here. Mixing this with water because the hills are quite dark anyway. There is a technique video on painting shadows which gives you all the information you need to know about this technique. Some valuable tips on there. And I really like this stage because it gives the painting depth, brings out the character. I'm just using a bit of water mixed with my shadow paint so as not to make the hills too dark. Done these shadows, I'm going to do the same on the reflection, again with water. Try and keep them horizontally if you can. I'm now going to do these under the trees here, and I've not put water with it so that I can get more denser shadows. And then across the field here there's quite a big shadow. And another shadow a bit further back across the field. And then there's some shadows in the trees here which will help give the trees more depth. Keep referring to your photo as well as the colour guide. There's quite a few shadows in these trees here. Just little shadows up here. I'm not doing it too strong, the shadow paint in the water, as it's a reflection anyway. And again, I'm using the horizontal brush strokes for this, just to keep the flatness of the water. I'm now on stage 4, the highlight stage. I'm just using pure white paint and the small brush for this. And it's just very fine lines. There is a technique video just on painting highlights, which gives you more information. This is just like where the sun's catching on the fells. Gives it a further dimension. You can refer to your photograph as well for where to put the highlights, and keep the brush loaded so that they come out nice and clean, the highlights do. These white lines are particularly effective on water because it's so reflective, and it just gives it that reflective look. What I do, I make sure that they go across like trees and the thing next to it, like the shadows and the water and the hills, so that it sort of ties it all in as the water. Like here, for example, I'll do it across. I'm connecting the reflection of the sky to the reflection of the hill, so I'm cutting across both of them with the highlight. And here I've just done some like circular ripples at the front where the swan is pushing itself along. The water's sort of being pushed along at the front there. Okay, that's my picture finished, with stage 4 all completed. I've enjoyed this painting. All the best with yours. Goodbye.